The mountain man hired lonely widow to cook for him, but her smile fed his starving heart. The cabin stood at the edge of the wilderness, where the wide plains rose into jagged ridges of stone and pine. Few dared to live so far from town, but for Elias, the mountain had always been home. He was a man of towering frame, his shoulders as broad as the logs that built his cabin, and his beard thick enough to hide the years of hardship written on his face. The wild had raised him, but even the wild could not fill the emptiness gnawing at him. Hunger had always been a familiar enemy, but now it was more than his body that starved. The silence of the cabin weighed heavier than the winters. Elias could hunt meat, trap rabbits, or fish the streams, but cooking was not his gift. His meals were crude, burnt, bland, or half-raw, and though they kept him alive, they left him restless. A man could endure hunger of the stomach, but not the hunger of the heart. It was in the small town of Ironwood, 2 days' ride from his cabin, that he found her. Mary Whitlock was a widow, still young, though grief had marked her with quiet eyes and a voice soft as falling snow. Her husband had died the winter past, leaving her with no children and no family but the small grave that lay behind her cottage. She survived by sewing and mending clothes, but the coin was never enough. Neighbors pitied her, yet few offered more than words. Elias saw her standing at the market, offering loaves of bread baked from flour she could scarcely afford. Her dress was plain, her hair braided neatly, but there was strength in the way she stood despite the weariness in her shoulders. Elias, a man unused to conversation, found his voice stumbling when he asked if she would consider cooking for him in his cabin. Mary blinked, startled, and for a moment he thought she might refuse. A lone woman going into the mountains with a stranger was no small matter. But the glint of honesty in his eyes, and perhaps her own desperate need, led her to nod slowly. "I can cook," she said. "But I will need flour, lard, sugar, things you do not seem to buy often." Elias gave her more coin than she asked for, and so their arrangement began. The first morning she arrived, her hands carried baskets of simple supplies. Elias had cleared the table, unsure how to prepare for her. She moved through the cabin with ease, dusting, setting pots on the fire, kneading dough. Her presence changed the space in quiet ways, the smell of bread instead of smoke, the sound of soft humming instead of silence, the sight of her smile, small, hesitant, but there. For Elias, meals became more than food. Her stews warmed his bones in ways the fire never had. Her biscuits were light, her roasts seasoned with care. Yet it was not only his stomach that filled. He began to linger at the table, watching the way her hands moved, the way she pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, the way her lips curved when she caught him staring. Mary, too, felt the change. The mountain man was rough-hewn, scarred, and intimidating to most. Yet he was gentle with her, speaking little but listening always. When he brought in game from the forest, he set it down with pride, like a boy eager for her approval. He asked once, awkwardly, if she missed town life. She had answered truthfully, "There is little left for me in town." His eyes softened then, and he offered her a piece of venison he had roasted himself, burnt at the edges, but she ate it with gratitude. Days turned to weeks. She came each morning, returned each evening, and slowly, the emptiness of the cabin gave way to laughter. She teased him when he tried to bake and produced a blackened crust. He teased her when she jumped at the howl of wolves outside, though he kept the fire stoked brighter for her comfort. One evening, after a long hunt, Elias stumbled back to the cabin, weary and bloodied from a fall. Mary gasped when she saw him, rushing to his side. She cleaned his wounds with steady hands, scolding him softly for being reckless. He watched her face, close enough to see the warmth in her eyes, and something inside him shifted. "You shouldn't care so much," he rumbled. "And you shouldn't think no one does," she replied, her voice trembling. From that night forward, their bond deepened. She began to leave little things behind, a shawl draped over the chair, a jar of preserves in the cupboard. He, in turn, repaired her cottage roof in town without asking, leaving her speechless when she found it whole. Neither spoke the word love, but it lived in the silence between them, growing stronger each day. Winter came fierce and unrelenting. Snow piled against the cabin walls, winds howled like ghosts across the peaks. Mary had chosen to stay rather than make the long journey to town. Together, they endured. He chopped wood while she baked bread, he hunted while she stitched furs. At night, they sat close by the fire, sharing stories of their pasts. He told her of the years he spent alone in the mountains, she told him of the husband she had buried. "You've lost much," Elias said softly. "So have you," Mary whispered. "But perhaps we have both found something, too." Her hand brushed his, tentative and trembling. He took it, rough and calloused, yet tender in its grip. In that moment, Elias felt a warmth greater than any fire, a fullness greater than any meal. By spring, the cabin was no longer just his. It was theirs. Flowers grew in jars by the window. Bread cooled on the table. The mountain man, once starved in body and soul, now found himself fed in every way. For Mary, the loneliness that had shadowed her heart eased each time his laughter shook the walls. She had thought herself a widow bound to grief, yet in Elias's quiet strength, she discovered a second chance at life. And so, the story of the mountain man and the lonely widow was not written in grand declarations or sudden passion, but in simple moments, shared meals, quiet smiles, and the steady certainty that love had come unexpected but true. Elias had hired a widow to cook for him. What he had not known was that her smile would feed a hunger deeper than any he had ever known, and heal the starving heart of a man who thought he would always live alone.